Bottom of the page. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, referring to step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. 2 or 3 things in that little paragraph which are probably real important. First, there's always been God's will. There's always been self-will. We could have always been operating on God's will, but apparently we were not, or we wouldn't have gotten into the difficulties we got into. So if we're going to have to operate on God's will, we're going to have to find what's within ourselves that block us off from God's will. Remember, He said, I give you self-will freely, and you can keep it forever, and I'll never take it back until you give it back. And before we can give it back, we've got to find out what's within our will that's been blocking us out from God's will. Now that's the purpose of this next step, is to find those things. Our liquor was but a symptom. It's amazing that after a while we learned alcohol is really not our problem. Our problem are those things that have always blocked us off from God's will, kept us restless, irritable, discontented, and kept us drinking alcohol. So that's what we're going to be looking for. I think the other thing that is important here is there is a definite time element related to here between steps 3 and 4. People keep asking us today, how long should we wait before we take step 4? Some people say 30 days, some say 90 days, some say 6 months. We heard a professional in the field of alcoholism the other day who is an AA member counseling people to wait a minimum of 2 years. And our question to him was, how damn many people have you killed with that statement? We're trying to find a way to live where we can be sober and peaceful and happy and free. And if we don't find those things that create our troubles and get rid of them, we don't stand a chance of being sober, peaceful, happy, and free. And every day that goes by that we stay restless, irritable, and discontented, every day that we're filled with shame, fear, guilt, and remorse is probably a day closer to the time when we're going to get drunk again. We just don't know how many days you can afford to go. It would vary with different people. God, I'd hate to find out how many days it would take me to end up getting drunk. Bill puts the time element on it. He said, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort. Now that means right now, immediately. And that makes sense. 4 has always followed 3, as far back as I can remember. So as soon as we do step 3, we need to get on with step 4. Now there's 2 or 3 reasons for that. One is, when we take step 3, that's probably going to remove just enough self-will to let us begin taking step 4. And if we don't do something about it, that self-will is going to come right back. And self-will is going to say, well, I really don't need to do this. Or self-will is going to say, I'm afraid to do this. And self-will will block us right out from taking step 4, and we'll continue to procrastinate until we end up getting drunk over it. So I think one of the major things is to realize that we're not ever going to do this step perfect. We're going to do it to the best of our ability. And we're going to get rid of at least enough junk that's going to let us stay sober long enough to get on with the rest of the program. But if we don't make some effort here in step 4, then we're going to be in serious trouble sooner or later. So we begin to look at the reasons then as to why we procrastinate. And as we say, fear's one, pride's another. But I think the real reason we don't do step 4 is we don't know how to do it. And it's confusing in the big book. And we don't understand how Bill intended for us to do it. So some of us years ago found a statement over in step 5 that said something about all your life story. And we said, oh, that's what they wanted us to do. Write our life story in step 4. So many of us began to do that. That's what I did. Now, it wasn't very important to other people, but it must have been important to me because there's about 162 pages in it. And I took it to another human being, and he read it and said, not very pretty, is it? And I said, no. And he tore it up and threw it in the wastebasket, said, you'll never have to be that way again. And I didn't learn anything. Everything that was in my life story, I already knew it. So writing it down taught me nothing new, period. Today I realize that 95% of my life story has nothing to do with my alcoholism anyhow. The fact that I was born in 1929, I don't think it's got a thing to do with my alcoholism. The fact that I graduated from high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I don't think it's got anything to do with my alcoholism. The fact that I went into service when I was 17, I don't think that's got anything to do with my alcoholism. The fact that I married a young lady when I was 21, I think it's got a thing to do with my alcoholism. I tell you what it did do. The 95% of my life story that had nothing to do with my alcoholism very effectively covered up the 5% that does have something to do with it, and I couldn't see it at all. So for me, that was an absolute waste of time. Then in our desperation, since that didn't work, somebody up in Minnesota wrote a 4-step inventory guide. And we took the Minnesota guide, we combined it with the big book, and we got more confused yet. And since that didn't work, somebody down in Dallas, Texas wrote a 4-step inventory guide. And we took the Dallas guide, the Minneapolis guide, and the big book and combined them all 3 together and got more fouled up yet. I don't know how many inventory guides are floating around now. Joe and I saw one the other day that had 26 pages in it. I'll guarantee you if you wasn't crazy as hell before you took it, you would be when you were through with it. Now all the time, the instructions on taking it have been in the big book, but they are so simple that we have overlooked them for years and years and years. And if you want to really understand how to do this according to the big book, again, you got to look at Bill Wilson and see how this guy writes. He loves to teach with parables. A parable is nothing more than telling us something about something we already know, and then comparing it with something else. You know, we had a great teacher that did that a couple thousand years ago. And when he wanted to teach something to a shepherd, he told him a story about sheep, and the shepherd would understand. Now, if he wanted to teach the same thing to the fisherman, he didn't go talk to him about sheep. He told him the story, but this time it was fish, and the fisherman would understand. Bill's doing the same thing to us in the big book. You know, when he talked about the great ocean liner, the moment after shipwreck, he knew that people would understand and know what he's talking about because in 1939, the Titanic was still fresh on everybody's mind. And he does that to us all the way through the book from time to time. He's going to do it here in step 4. He's going to tell us how to take a business inventory, assuming that we know something about a business inventory. And then he's going to turn right around and tell us to do the same thing with our lives, to take our inventory as he just told us to do with a business inventory. This guy loves to use words that mean the same thing. Don't forget that. He's always using different words that mean exactly the same thing. Now, with that in mind, let's just kind of relax, and let's start looking at a few words, and let's see if we can't see how simple step 4 is according to the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. One word we need to look at is the word inventory. People are always asking, can it be mental or does it have to be written? The dictionary defines an inventory as a written list of items. There's no such thing as a mental inventory. You know, a lot of times you ladies, you go in the kitchen before you go to the grocery store, you look over your food stocks, you come out there, somebody might say, what have you been doing? And you may say, well, I've been in there inventorying my food stocks. No. If you didn't make a written list of items, you just been in there looking around. You didn't take an inventory. So that should lay to rest the question, of whether it will be written or mental. It'll have to be a written list of items. He said, therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. Now watch him. He immediately jumps to a business. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Now I think his first valid comparison here is this. You and I understand that if you owned a business, if you didn't inventory that business once in a while, you would probably go broke. You wouldn't know what's been stolen out of your store. You wouldn't know what's been sold out of your store. You wouldn't know what you need to replace to fill the shelves back up again so you'll have something to sell. You wouldn't know what's become damaged and it's just sitting there taking up valuable shelf space. You wouldn't know what's become out of style. You wouldn't know what you need to put on sale and get rid of it so you can bring new items in. Now, I don't care whether our business is ladies' purses, men's watches, bicycles, shoes, or whatever. In a business, if we don't inventory, we probably will go broke. I think his first valid comparison is this. By using personal and business within 2 sentences, I think he's saying the same thing will happen to us in our business of staying sober. You know, we have one of the most important businesses in the world. Probably the most important business in the world as far as we're concerned. And that's the business of finding a way to live. So we can have some peace of mind, serenity, and happiness and not have to go back to drinking. And if we go broke in our business, that means to get drunk all over again. So I think his first statement is this. Whether it be business or personal, without an inventory, we're probably going to end up going broke. Now then, he starts to tell us about a business inventory. He says, taking a commercial inventory. Now, Dad burn him. He could have said business again, but he doesn't like to repeat himself over and over. So instead of business, this time he's going to call it a commercial inventory. See what he does to us? And that's confusing as hell until you realize what he's done. We're going to throw a sheet up here on the screen, and it's going to be a valid comparison between a business inventory and a personal inventory. And we're going to look at the words Bill uses and then make our comparison. On one side of that, we will have the word business inventory, the other side of the sheet, personal. On the right-hand side of the sheet, under business, let's look at some words. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding. We're going to take those key words of fact-finding and list them under the business inventory. Fact-finding and a fact-facing process. We're going to put fact-facing there. It is an effort to discover the truth, and we're going to put the truth there, about the stock in trade. And we're going to put stock in trade there. Stock in trade, that's the ladies' purses, the watches, the bicycles, the shoes, whatever's in there to sell. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. And I think we can all see that. He's going to go in there and he's going to search out the facts. He's going to face the facts. He's going to discover the truth about the stock in trade in his store. And he's trying to find damaged and unsaleable goods. He doesn't need to inventory the good items in the store. They're not going to cause him to go broke. The good items are going to be sold anyhow. They're not going to stay there and take up floor space. What he's trying to find are those items that nobody wants to buy, that fills in his shelf spaces, and they're costing him money every day. He's probably got borrowed money tied up in them, paying interest on it. Now, if he can get them out of there and put new items in their place, then he's going to have something that people will want to buy, and he'll be successful at his business. And I think every one of us can see that without any problem at all. Now he said, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. In other words, we're going to do with our lives what he just told us to do with the business inventory. Now then, let's look at step 4, and let's look under the personal inventory. He said we made a searching, tie that together with fact-finding. I think you'll notice they mean the same thing. He said we made a searching and fearless, tie fearless together with fact-facing. And I think you'll notice they mean the same thing. He said we made a searching and fearless moral. And we said, oh, shit. There it is. There's that list of dirty, filthy, nasty items. I'm not sure what old Bill Wilson knew, but I'm convinced of one thing. This guy knew the English language. If he had wanted you and I to make a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items, I think he would have said we made a searching and fearless amoral or immoral inventory. He didn't say that. He said moral. And this bugged the hell out of me with my keen intellectual alcoholic mind. I finally had to find the answer. I went to the dictionary. I looked up the word moral. You know what it means? Truth. Facts of the matter. Things as they are. That's exactly what it means. So moral and truth mean the same thing. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of what? Of ourselves. Now, we're the only stock in trade in our business is staying sober. We're the only stock in trade in our business is staying sober. And as we make this searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, our object is to find and disclose the damaged and unsaleable thinking that blocks us off from God's will. You see, my body has nothing to do with my sobriety. The only thing that has anything to do with my sobriety is my mind. If my thinking's right, I'll probably stay sober. If my thinking's lousy, I'll probably go broke. And there's certain thought patterns in my mind that very effectively blocks God out. And in order for God to get in, those thought patterns are going to have to disappear. They're just like this cup. If that cup is taking up space on the shelf, before I can put anything else on that space, I've got to take the cup away. And my mind is the same thing. Before anything else can occupy that space, the thinking that's blocked me off from God will have to disappear. So our stock in trade will be how we think. It won't be ladies' purses and men's shoes. It'll be how we think. Now, if the owner of the business goes broke tomorrow, that will not be determined by the stock in trade he had 25 years ago. And it's not going to be determined by what he plans on putting in his store 25 years in the future. Whether he goes broke tomorrow or not is going to be determined by what's in his store today. If you and I in our business are staying sober, if we go broke tomorrow, it's not going to be determined by how we used to think 25 years ago or by how we intend to think 25 years in the future. It's going to be determined by how we think right now, today. Stinking thinking leads to drinking. And if today's thinking's okay, I'll probably be sober tomorrow. But if today's thinking is lousy, I may be drunk tomorrow. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to inventory my thoughts today that block me off from God's will. Now, all selfish, self-centered people are blocked off from God's will. All selfish, self-centered people display certain manifestations of that. We looked at them a while ago when we went through that chart on the basic instincts of life. Selfish, self-centered people are madder than hell. Nobody's treating them right. The world's not treating them right. Things aren't going their way, and they're madder than hell about it. Selfish, self-centered people are scared to death. They can't depend on God, they can't depend on other people, they can't depend on themselves, and they've got to be filled with fear. Selfish, self-centered people are always hurting other people. And the result of that is guilt and pain and fear and remorse. Now, a mind that is filled with resentment, and a mind that is filled with fear, and a mind that is filled with guilt and remorse has very effectively blocked any good thinking out of it entirely. And God's will is effectively blocked out. There's three kinds of illnesses a human being can have. Now, you could be physically ill, and you'll go to an MD. And the MD will read certain symptoms coming from your physical illness. He'll make a diagnosis on those symptoms, prescribe, and hopefully you get well. If you're mentally ill, you go to a psychiatrist. Your mental illness will display certain symptoms. The psychiatrist reads them, diagnoses, prescribes, and hopefully you get okay. Now, the only other kind of illness you can have is spiritual illness. One who is blocked off from God is spiritually ill. Spiritual illness, like the other two, displays symptoms: resentment, fear, and harms done to other people. Now, I like to look at my store up here, or my head up here, as a little store. Not much. Little handy stop. Easy out, 7-Eleven, something like that.
7-Eleven.
And in this store, I've got display cases, I've got file cabinets, and I've got storage rooms. We got some display cases right over here. And those display cases are filled with resentments. Damn her. Damn him. I told him not to do that. I'm going to show him. Damn the federal government. On and on and on. That whole display case is filled with that. Can God get in there? No way. Over here on this side of my store, I've got a file cabinet, and it's filled with fear. Oh, Jesus, what's she going to do when she finds out? What are they going to say about that? What are they going to think about that? And that whole file cabinet is filled with fear. Can God get in there? Back here in the back of my store, I've got a storage room, and it's filled with fear, guilt, and remorse associated with those things I've been doing to hurt other people. Can God get in the storeroom? No. But if I could get rid of resentments, then God's thinking can enter. If I get rid of these fears, then God's thinking can enter. If I can get rid of this guilt and remorse, then God's thinking can enter, and I may find peace of mind, serenity, and happiness instead of anger, fear, guilt, and remorse. And I may find that I can stay sober. My book tells me exactly how to look at these things, how to analyze these things, how to get them out of my head, and how to keep them out of my head so that I'll be operating on God's will instead of self-will. A very simple little procedure. Watch it. I think you're going to be absolutely amazed at what this will do for you.